Deus Ex Machina, and I decided, you know what? I want to do a video about the new Dune movie. I just saw it yesterday, and I saw a lot of positive buzz, and then like one negative response from somebody I really used to respect. So I wanted to give my own review. Suffice to say, it's really good, and I want to talk about some of the things the takeaways I got from it. Now, we expected, or rather, I expected the new Dune being about 2.5 hours long would be similar structurally to the first part of Lynch's Dune. We know that Lynch's Dune is semi-faithful to the source material. The first hour of the 84 Dune is extremely faithful, save for some really notable exceptions. The weirding modules, the introduction of Fade Rautha and the Emperor in the first act, and the spelling out of the political machinations at the beginning. It's after Paul enters the desert near about 2/3 into the film where the largest cuts appear. Now, if you look at the miniseries from 2000, you'll see how similar the first part is to Lynch's first half. It kind of gives you a lens into the mindsets of people who attempt to adapt this kind of material. So 2021's Dune, which I will always call Denis Dune, is a masterpiece, but with a few caveats that prevent it from being perfect. And I'll state that virtually no films are perfect, except for maybe Galaxy Quest and maybe Knight's Tale. So back what I was saying previously, I thought that Denis would remove everything Lynch invented, include everything he did put in that was faithful, and more. Now, that's not entirely correct. What we have is the first 2/3 of Lynch's Dune, the first half of the novel, with a bunch of new scenes not from the book, a bunch of new scenes from the book not present in the 84 film, and then stretched out to 2.5 hours. Every scene duplicated in both films is 2 or 4 times longer in Denis Dune than it is in the 84 Dune. And I actually adore that. However, there are scenes from the book that are present in the 84 Dune that's missing from Denis Dune. And in an ironic note, many of these scenes were cut out of Lynch's Dune. So for people who don't know, the Lynch's Dune from 84 is about just a little over 2 hours long. And some years later, TBS, this is actually probably in the mid 90s, got a hold of a lot of unused footage and cut a about 3-hour version of the whole thing. Now, people have acquired this footage and re-edited it to try to make it more faithful. And there's a couple really good edits you can find online on YouTube for free. And they've spliced this in the best they can to create what they think is the most faithful version of Lynch's Dune. And some of these are really good. I think the best one, I think, is about 95% of what I would do. There's a few things I would do a little differently. Now, for example, I know that the narration is like the internal monologue is actually something that's faithful from the books, and you'll notice that missing from this movie. And I don't care for it. I don't care for the internal monologue, even though I know it's faithful. I don't think it's a good idea. It's one of the things you usually take out of a film. But if you watch that extended version, you'll see a lot of stuff that Lynch shot that's actually from the novel that don't show up in Denis Dune. People won't see Gurney playing music, for example. The other thing is certain characters like Thufir Hawat and Dr. Yue probably have close to half the screen time as their characters do in the Lynch's version. Peter DeVries is also reduced as well. Gurney Halleck, I'd say, is about even, maybe a little more in Denis Dune. So despite having twice as much screen time, there are certain characters, like knowing that Thufir and Yui are somewhat marginalized and the Emperor and Fate are non-existent. What we have instead is increased focus on the elements Lynch missed and openly denied. In the 84 Dune, Lynch represented the Emperor up front, making him the primary antagonist and the Baron as a lackey. Now, by his removal in the movie, the Emperor has a much more looming threat, as he did in the first Star Wars, kind of like the way Darth Vader was in Star Wars. So the Emperor doesn't get introduced. He's mentioned in the first 2 films and only gets introduced in the third film. It's the kind of same way, or we only hear mention of the Emperor, we don't actually see him. And in this case, it gives room for the Baron to be more menacing, and boy is he menacing. And with Fade Out, the Beast Raban gets to shine. And we have a lot more of the Atreides family and the political situation they find themselves in. We hear about the Lanstrad and the currency of Solari, which is the latter is never mentioned in in the original Lynch's Dune. In fact, the first time I ever saw it is in the book, and of course, it's also in the Dune board game that just recently came out that I played. But there's a sequence in the 2001. There's a famous dinner scene that is lacking in both versions of Dune, both film versions of Dune, and we're never really given a moment to settle in with the occupation in Arrakis. And of course, being the first half, Chani barely receives any screen time. But the new scenes added, either whole cloth or invented or pulled from the book, are greatly appreciated. With Duncan, the Duke, Kynes. Spoilers, I guess. I mean, a lot of people I know have either read the book or seen the movie, and the original '84. So I'm not really spoiling this. If you don't want to know about them, then please, for the love of God, stop this now. But I'm going to talk about some things that are present in the stories, and this happened in this film. So we know that Duncan, the Duke, and Kynes, that the characters do die, and their deaths were, how do I put this? In the '84 version, they all got taken out quickly, or foolishly in some cases. And with Kynes, their death was faithful to the material. But I always thought that people like Duncan and the Duke were kind of taken out like a bit of a bitch, to be honest with you. But here, everyone goes out in a high. No one dies without taking a lot of people out with them. And it's really, really wonderful. Action scenes are larger, more details. Ornithopters show up, which is friggin' awesome. The scenes of prescience are also heavily increased. In Lynch, they're less frequent, which is hard to believe, I know. And his are also more vague. Here, Paul is receiving specific visions of a future he may change. And this goes back to that one aspect, the greatest aspect of Lynch's version that David missed. Paul Atreides and his mother are aware that political and politics and religion, not God or magic, have structured a foundation of myths within the Fremen on Arrakis, constructed dogmas for the purposes of presenting a godlike figure in front of them, a plan that the Bene Gesserit have been working on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Paul knows that if this is not controlled, this belief will turn into fanaticism and eventually a holy war that will engulf the entire galaxy. He knows this and chooses to continue for the sake of vengeance. And that's the big thing. In Lynch's version, Paul is the god figure with magical powers. There's no subtlety. It went from an allegory of the evils of fanaticism and religious manipulation into a literal Jesus parable. These are the critical changes made in Denis Dune. This is not Jodorowsky's Dune or Lynch's Dune, and ironically, Denis is making Herbert's Dune while also maintaining his own vision. It reminds me of Robert Rodriguez and his adaptations of Sin City and Alita. He's so humble. He can create a faithful story while also maintaining his own vision. It's a rare talent that I think we really need to celebrate. It takes a lot of humility for a director to want to honor someone else's work while presenting a vision of their own. So that structure, it's a extremely faithful adaptation of Dune. It still misses certain things, and what it really does, it takes the key moments of Dune. Like, that's the thing. I'll explain this. Instead of it being everything that was in the Lynch version, and then we just added a bunch of new stuff, I think that was the assumption, that taking the hour and 10 or 20 minutes of Lynch's version and then stretching it and then making sure that it's more faithful. They took that same amount of story and content, took all the stuff that Lynch invented, added stuff that was faithful, and then stretched it out so everything takes its time. Everything is paced a bit more purposely, and that's basically what this is. So if you're expecting a bunch of new stuff you didn't see, unless it's near the end of the story, like during the fall of Arrakis, is a lot longer in this scene. So a lot more things happen. Like I said, Duncan is the one character probably changed the most. Like I say, Thufir Hawat, Gurney Halleck, Dr. Yue, they don't have a lot of increased scenes. In the case of Thufir, they've been cut. They're actually lower. And Duncan picks up on that absence because Duncan has a lot more. And of course, it's Jason Momoa. He's fantastic. He totally sells this role. He's perfect. And he picks up a lot of that excess slack. Same thing with Dr. Kynes. A lot more room with that character, a lot more development. So it's interesting that the characters that were marginalized in this film get pumped up, and some of the more major characters, they get pushed to the side. And I thought that was fascinating. I think one of the reasons is, especially with Gurney and Thufir, is that the characters that got a little marginalized in this story don't die in this story, which means in a sequel they're coming back. So it's one of those situations where once you watch both films together, Dune 1 and Part 2, which, hope to God that they will make, you will look at it at the whole piece and go, oh no, they have just as much screen time as they did, as we can expect. It's because they're looking at the situation and going, you know what? Since these characters are croaking in this story and they're not going to be in the sequel, let's focus more on them. And I think that's probably the right way to go. So when people complain that we're not seeing enough Thufir or Gurney, I'm like, you know what? We can, and we probably will. So that's structure. On the craft side, this is the best looking and made film of the year, and maybe years. Visuals look perfect, like motion blur and sun glare. I've not been this awestruck in a film I can't remember. More so than even Blade Runner 2049, which was also a Denis film. The Arrival had that level of awe in the opening act. Gravity did in some moments. Maybe Ad Astra. Ad Astra is a fantastic film. I know a lot of people didn't care for it. I think it's also very slow and purposeful. I know the science is a bit loosey-goosey, but it had moments of just awe and just soundscapes of visuals and awe and music and sound effects, and I absolutely love that. I'm sold on that. Interstellar on a purely visual scale, and of course it has that amazing Hans Zimmer soundtrack. But I still think Dune beats them all. From a sound and music point of view, I envy those in Atmos, and I was talking to a friend who saw it in Atmos, and he confirmed my suspicions, because even in my traditional 5.1, Dune 2021, Denis Dune, was biblical. One of the best sounding movies of the year. Probably going all the way back to Mad Max Fury Road. Hans Zimmer has knocked it out of the park in ways that surprises even me. I've been collecting his soundtracks since The Peacemaker. Yeah, if you can believe it, I actually owned The Peacemaker on a CD. So I've been collecting Hans Zimmer for a long time. I'm a big curator of soundtrack music. People who know me know that I've been doing this for probably 30 years. I'm a diehard fan of a lot of specific composers. Hans Zimmer is one of them. I'm also a huge fan of Jerry Goldsmith. He passed away a long time ago. And there's certain musicians that I just love to follow. And whenever people kind of decry Hans Zimmer, I'm just like, you know what? Every single time he'll do something that'll surprise you. I thought his soundtrack he collaborated on with Blade Runner was amazing. Obviously, he's done fantastic work with Nolan, but I think this is one of his best soundtracks. I've heard it separately, and I didn't realize how good it was until I saw it in context, and now I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. So when I said earlier, though, that many sequences were similar to those in Lynch's Dune, narratively, but 4 or 5 times longer, in no way is that a criticism. I could have watched 30 minutes of ornithopters flying without dialogue, and I would have been happy, especially the way these looked. I mean, they had this fantastic visual element of, it almost reminded me of Ridley Scott's directing in Black Hawk Down, right? When you saw the helicopters approaching in the beginning after the film, the footage of the ornithopters looked as realistic as that, and that footage from Black Hawk Down was real. And finally, I wanted to give a shout out to people that are really championing this film. By the way, I'm giving this a 9.5 out of 10. It's fantastic. The 0.5 is it's amazing. Quinn from Quinn's Ideas, but I think we just liked the film. It would have been screwed. Dan Murrell, Chris Stuckman, Jeremy Johns. I think they're all on bandwagon. So I found it really disappointing that Bob Chipman of Movie Bob would just miss the point so arrogantly. Like, I've never seen a review where someone walked in with that obvious of a chip on his shoulder. So that was really quite disappointing. It's quite a disappointment. So yeah, how the mighty have fallen. But don't let that discourage you. This film is as good as they say. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think it's worthy of a second visit. I'm going to see it again. Oddly enough, opening day in my hometown was only in 2D, and I want to go see it a second time. I mean, I know it's on HBO Max, but I'm going to see it again in 3D, and I'll probably enjoy it even more. It's too bad we don't have an Atmos screen here. But and funny thing is, I have an Atmos theater in my well, most I have an Atmos rig. I need 2 more speakers to get a full Atmos. I can't play it at that level of quality because I live in a basement suite, unfortunately. But that's why I envy. I wish I was going out of town to a bigger city so I could see this thing in like D box or Atmos. That would have been just a religious experience. I mean, I saw Blade Runner 2049 opening day on D box in Atmos in Vancouver, and that's just it. That's how movies have to be seen. I mean, that's how you have to see it now. And the reason why I'm discouraged going to our local theater is because we don't have Ultramax, we don't have IMAX, we don't have Atmos, and even the 3D is not that great. But I do plan on seeing it a second time because I want to support it. I want to make sure. I know they have said almost unequivocally there's going to be a sequel, but they haven't confirmed that it will be. Like so far, it's making money. Like it's not bombing. This is not The Last Duel. This film is going to pull a profit. How much will depend on certain factors. I think when they look at the HBO Max numbers of people who did watch it and compare it to how much money made theatrically, I think they're in a good position so that they can justify putting out the sequel. I think once we see that, we'll see this merging piece where people will value both of these together as a singular work. And I think this is going to go down in history as one of the best single cinematic achievements in adapting storytelling, probably since Lord of the Rings. So 22 years or so. But anyway, guys, I want to get that out of my head. So that's it. I did this. It was half scripted, half not. So I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.